All right, welcome everybody. Sorry I couldn't be in class today. We had to do Notes D online, but this is, I believe, the best way to both cover the information in a efficient manner and also learn what we need to learn for the test. So today what our topic is all about is the progressive movement. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about the Gilded Age, and the Gilded Age was this time period where America was progressing as an industrial leader, but it really did not benefit the actual workers as they were submitted to horrible working conditions, terrible wages, didn't have workers' comp, as well as many other things. And so what the progressive movement really is all about is kind of the movement away from the Gilded Era. And so we call them progressives because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make progress. It's in the root word there of their name. And so they're going to try to really attack all of the social issues as well as the political corruption that was going on during the Gilded Age. So it's during this time that a lot of the major figures like Rockefeller that you can see here on your left-hand side really begins moving. A lot of people used to call him a captain of industry, but a lot of his unethical methods are going to be exposed, and they're going to start calling him this term robber barons. And so, people are going to start looking at things a little bit differently. And by the early 1900s, the progressives are really going to kind of sweep through the nation as a very strong, both political and social party. Very similar to how the radical Republicans took over during Reconstruction, the progressives are really going to take over at the turn of the century when they elect this man right here, Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, I think I highlighted that was not very good. Now, Teddy Roosevelt was elected in 1900, and when he was elected, he really took a special effort to erase the problems in society: urban poverty, child labor, political corruption, corporations, female suffrage, alcoholism, and this is all going to be trying to progressives are all going to try to take this and reform the problems that they see in society. I love this era here because we get to talk about one of my favorite guys in the world, Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, if you look at that smile, how can you not love him? He's like a big teddy bear. But the progressive movement is all about putting the government really back in the hands of the people. During the Gilded Age, the business owners really ran America. They made massive fortunes that we can hardly imagine, and they took advantage of the workers. And that was the game that was played. It wasn't illegal, but it was obvious that in a lot of ways it was unethical. And so you're going to see politicians in the 1900s like Teddy Roosevelt on your left and Woodrow Wilson on your right begin to really move away from that corruption and start to do political platforms that are based on things like a square deal, that all Americans get a square deal. And President Woodrow Wilson's campaign was to have a new freedom, that that the people should have a say and that they should be able to do what they need to do. And so when you look at this list here, you're going to see all the causes of the progressive movement. Again, the excesses of the Gilded Age, the income disparity, the overly lavish lifestyles by the rich. I mean, all of these things eventually contribute to people saying, look, enough is enough. We need to have a society that at least is made for equal opportunity, that everyone has a real chance to make the most out of their lives. And so I wanted to take a moment to look at this picture because, to be honest, this was going to be one of your essay questions, but we took that out for your test. But I think it's a great picture because it really shows the difference maybe between the Gilded Age and how the progressive era kind of comes into that. So in the top level here, you're going to see the Gilded Age, where the rich are having a phenomenal party and everything's great and wealthy and everybody's happy. And then and it's all on the shoulders and the backs of the working class down here. And where the progressive movement really comes in is right here in the center of the picture, this moment where the working class kind of reaches out and says, you know what, I deserve some of this wealth too. I deserve some of this prosperity that America is experiencing. And they break through kind of that ceiling that had always been in place for them. So, when we look at more of these causes, a lot of them we've talked about because we talked about as problems of the Gilded Age. And the problems of the Gilded Age are the causes of the progressive movement. So dangerous working conditions, child labor, employment of women and not getting equal pay, All of these things are going to cause the progressives to come in and try to change and really move away from the evils in society. So here are the goals of the progressive movement. Again, they're going to try to put government back into the hands of the people, so that these massive new population that we have can be controlled by individuals. They're also going to be guaranteed economic opportunities through government regulation. So you're going to see the government really come back and start to regulate business again, whereas it had kind of gotten out of control during the Gilded Age. And you're going to see them try to eliminate a lot of social injustices. So when you look at these two pictures up here, you see Teddy Roosevelt on the right, and then this man over here on the left with the railroad head, kind of symbolizing Vanderbilt, trying to break up his monopoly and make competition a part of the economy again, so that prices go down for the consumer. Here you see probably a representation of J.P. Morgan as a big banker, and Roosevelt trying to eliminate and squeeze the money out of the wealthy and give it back to the rich. Some might call him maybe a modern day Robin Hood. But the second thing that the progressives are going to do, pay attention to this top dot here, is they're going to try to put the government back in the hands of the people. So there's going to be three levels that they do this at. The first is going to be local, the second will be state, and the final will be obviously federal government. So you got local, state, and federal government. Now, the first way in local governments, what they're going to do is they're going to create a position called a city manager, or a commissioner. And basically this is going to be a position that they create so that the cities are actually responsive to the needs and the wants of the people. So we're going to do away with these crime lords that run the cities and rather have people that are elected to run those cities. So that's your local government. In the state governments, there are going to be three new types of laws that they're going to create. And these are the key things that you want to get out of Notes D and that trip people up. The first is a referendum. Now the key there is refer. A referendum allows for state legislators, so people that have been elected to state government, to place proposed laws on the ballot for the final approval by the people. So what they're doing is the state government is referring back to the people that live in their state to make sure this law is something they want to pass. So this past November when I went to vote, I not only had to vote for either Republican or Democrat for president, but I also had two state laws that were on a referendum that were to be voted on by the people of Virginia. And so we voted for president, but we also voted for those state laws, and that's an example of a referendum. The second is called an initiative. Now, an initiative is kind of the opposite of a referendum. If a referendum is the state government coming back to the people, an initiative is where an individual can initiate a law by proposing it directly to the state legislatures. This dates all the way back to the old Puritan idea, but that individuals can change government. So if there is a law that gets enough support in a local community, an individual can actually go to the state government, propose that law, and then the state government can vote whether or not they want to put that into their state constitution or pass it as a law altogether. The third is a recall. And a recall is essentially an impeachment, but at the state level. So a recall is where voters have the power to remove corrupt officials by simply taking a vote to impeach them. So the most famous examples of recalls in 2003, the governor of California, this man over here named Gray Davis, ran California essentially into the ground by overspending on his budget, and the people voted him out. And in the middle of his term, they actually held a re-election for a new governor, and the governor who won was a Republican who had made most of his fame by acting, and was also a very famous bodybuilder. You might know him. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he took over as governor of California in 2003 after Mr. Davis here on the right got recalled. So a recall is a impeachment, but just at the state level. All right. Now, in the federal government, reform that we are going to institute are primary elections. So the examples I gave you here are in the past year, we had all of these candidates that ran for the Republican ticket to try to win the Republican ticket before they ran for the actual president. So you might recognize some of these faces: Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, as well as Trump, who eventually won the primary and then the presidency. All of these men and women had to win the primary before they could run for president. And then finally, one of a couple last elections here is that we also created the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is the idea that the people should be able to directly elect their national senators. In the past, in the original Constitution, it was the state government that elected their national senators. But this is really a way to remove that barrier between the people and their national government by allowing us to directly elect our senators. In this case, we have Tim Kaine on the right, Mark Warner on the left, and these are currently our two senators that represent us in our national government in D.C. We also implemented secret ballots. This is a voting method where voters' choices are kept confidential so that people can't be influenced like they would have been in the past. Situations like this where somebody would have been standing right outside the voters' booth and intimidating certain people or certain races could no longer happen. So voting should always be confidential and anonymous. And then this is where our muckrakers really come into be. You're doing your project on muckraking, but it's the muckrakers that really focused on the child labor aspect and the factory conditions for the average worker. So they focus much more on the social problems rather than the government corruption. But muckraking was a big part of this. And then the final piece of all of it is the women's suffrage movement, because it's during the Progressive era where Susan B. Anthony, who, by the way, we met in the 1850s, here she is as a younger woman when she was working with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, finally got the momentum that she needed and saw her life's work culminate in the passage of the 19th Amendment. And the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920 and gave women the right to vote, which was much longer than it should have ever been. But by 1920, because of these progressives, people looking for progress, we're finally going to see a lot of different laws here that are initiating change. So some call the progressives liberals. Some might even call them radicals, as we mentioned before with Republicans. But they're people who are trying to bring equality into the society of America. So please pay attention to those keywords, the referendum, the recall, and the initiative, as well as a couple of the other laws. Please feel free to go back and go through. They're all very important and they'll be tested. And please be ready for your test on Wednesday. Good luck, and I'll see you next period.